Hello, everybody. Welcome back after the Get Abstract webinar summer break. The chat is going crazy. So many people are coming in. I'm very excited. I hope everybody is doing well. And it's really great having you here today. My name is Ramona. Some of you already know me. I've been very much looking forward to our September session because I really think you're going to like this today. So, as busy professionals, busy bees, I'm sure you've heard, thought, read a lot about work life balance. I think about it every day, and to be honest. And the funny thing is that work isn't separate from life. They are very different, but they are connected. Don't you agree? So, as you attend this webinar, I take it for granted that you work in an organization that cares about its employees' well being. And that's already a great start, I would say. So, let's talk about it together with my guest, leadership strategist, award winning author, and keynote speaker, Dan Pontefract. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Ramona. So great to be here.
Really nice having you here. Dan is here for you guys today, so please take the opportunity and ask questions in the Q&A section at any time during the session. So we have the chat here where all your messages are coming in. This is where you can chat with your colleagues and other people on this webinar. And then below that, there is a bubble. It's the Q&A. So please post your questions for Dan there at any time, and we will address as many as possible. And a very popular question among our viewers is there recording? Yes, there will be a recording, and you will receive it in a follow-up email in the next few days. So then, backstage, we have already been talking a bit about your books, and the latest one is called Work-Life Plume. It was an immediate hit and award winner, offering a revolutionary approach to merging work and personal life instead of balancing it. In your opinion, what's wrong with the very traditional concept of work-life balance?
Ramona, it's great to be here. That question really can take all of the time here. So I'm going to try to be very succinct and helpful, but uncovering a little bit of what my research shows. So, and I think everyone would agree that when we say balance, there is this implied, almost unattainable ideal here, this perfect equilibrium between work and life. But we all know here that both work and life can be unpredictable. And so, this idea of achieving 100% balance is quite frankly balderdash, a big word there, otherwise known as kind of unrealistic and stupid. So, my research, my interviewing, my thinking as a former executive in big companies is that actually work and life are intertwined, Ramona. And work influences life, sometimes good, sometimes bad, and life influences work, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So, this idea of balance, that in fact we could actually balance them at the same time, given the fluctuations that happen, is impossible. Now, could they be balanced some of the time? Well, sure. But to achieve work-life balance sort of presupposes that we can be balanced all the time. And to me, that's not impossible. We can't we can't let each of the two plates, work and life, spin equally. They spin sometimes at different speeds, sometimes they crash, sometimes they break, Ramona. And this interconnectedness of us juggling or balancing the spinning plates, I think we need to be thinking about. Okay, a couple reasons why. So some data, we'll get into some stories later, but first the data. So what I realized, and even up to date, so I kind of rechecked some of the data to see where we are, and it hasn't stopped. And what I mean by that is concepts like stress, anxiety, burnout, loneliness, these are all continuing to increase, whether it's Gallup data, World Health Organization, it doesn't matter where you look.
Mhm.
The data is compelling. They just keep going up. And so whether you're stressed out at work, you're going to bring that home. Whether you're anxious in life because there are some things there that are going on, you're going to bring that to work, wherever your work may be. So we've got economic issues, we've got absenteeism issues, we've got productivity issues. We've got significant issues in the organization. The difference between what frontline people think, how they're feeling, what mid workers think, mid management, what senior executives, senior leaders think. So the bottom line here is, Ramona, just to start, is that I believe it's irrefutable that for us to achieve 100% work life balance is just an absolutely unattainable goal. And we should be looking at the construct of whatever this thing is between work and life differently, which is what my argument is really in today's conversation.
Mhm. All that you said, let's turn it around. What are then the benefits of work-life bloom?
Well, if you think about it, what I'm trying to get at, first and foremost, is that we don't always bloom. And I think that's the spoiler alert. I think what we need to understand is that we should strive for bloom, which is basically in both work and life. There are going to be times in our work and our lives where they come together. It's like, wow, this is amazing. Thank gosh that I am blooming in both work and life. But the evidence suggests to us that, including me, you're going to fall into other categories. And I want you to leave today for two things. First of all, Ramona and everyone listening in, uh, I hope that you're blooming. You should aspire to bloom in both work and life. But the reality is that you're probably at some point during your life and or your career not going to be blooming. And I'm sorry about that, but that's the facts. And so, from a business perspective, what we need to be thinking about is if we say things, Ramona, like, oh, we want you to bring your best self, your full self, your whole self to work. Well,
Heard
we
that a
better be
lot.
well, as leaders, we better be ready, right, to say, well, actually, what if they're not? Are we going to do anything about that? And that to me is problematic ultimately.
Mhm. Delphine is pointing out for us that there are differences in different countries regarding what balance in work and life means. That's also something that we can talk about a bit more later on.
Yep.
Coming back to bloom, the word is in the title. You want people to bloom in both spheres, as you just said, like work and life. So, could you explain a bit more the metaphor that you use here? It reminds me so much of those beautiful Swiss alpine meadows that we have over here. So, could you explain a bit more how you like came up with this metaphor and what in detail it means to you?
So for those that don't know, Ramona is in the beautiful country of Switzerland right now, and the
Wow.
Swiss alpine meadows are just gorgeous. And so whether you're in Switzerland and thinking about the alpine meadows, or you're just thinking about your local forest or your local park, or maybe you've got a garden in your backyard or on your balcony, whatever the case may be, the metaphor of bloom is about flourishing. And the word flourishing kind of means like eudaimonia, which is the Latin word for basically like, am I feeling pretty good? Not just surviving. So, like a well tended garden, or like in the Swiss alpine meadows, Ramona, blooming represents growth. It represents resilience. It represents vitality in both work and life. So, what I'm getting at with the metaphor is that when you nurture the right factors, and metaphorically, that could be sunlight, soil, water, talking to your plants, maybe, you can thrive. But flowers, my tomatoes, my beans, my garden, my backyard, they actually need the right balance. There's a good time to use the word of sunlight, of water, of soil nutrients to actually grow. And employees basically are like crops, which sounds weird, but there are times when we need the support of a manager to help us with sunlight or water. There are times when we're going to sprout right up and we're going to take it on ourselves and we're going to bloom. But we have to remember as well that as human beings, we're kind of like the plants, and we have ups and we have downs. There are some points when we will bloom, but there are some points when we're kind of in the ground and we're in the dirt and we're just like a little seed and we want to punch through, but we're going to need some assistance. Or conversely, there's some really hot weather or some really cold weather, and then we might be wilted or we might stunt a little bit, and we might need some extra help there. And so my whole metaphor here is that there are seasons. We have winter, we have summer, we have fall, we have spring, and crops like employees are going to have ups and downs. And for those of you that took the assessment, I watched them come in. Some of you are blooming, some of you are stunted, some of you are budding, some of you are in renewal. And that's totally fine, just like my garden.
Mhm. In case you didn't have the chance to take Dan's free work life bloom personal assessment yet, we are going to drop the link in the chat. Give me a quick thumbs up if you already saw that. Use
Nice.
your emojis. I love as they fly all over the screen. Thank you. There you go. All right. So, for those of you who haven't had the chance to take it yet, please look at the link and we'll talk a bit more about the four garden phases from the assessment later. Then, first, let's talk a bit about the connection between work and life. I assume there is something deeper to it than that we sometimes talk about work stuff at our dinner table or family stuff in the criteria. Where do you see the connection other than that?
Okay, so what I'm not getting at in the book, or even just the work that I'm doing in organizations, helping them see how to do this with leadership and with culture, et cetera, is that I'm not saying like if you're a leader, you're going to go talk to your employees about whether they should have a garage sale, whether their mortgage rate is right, whether they need to move house and try a third bedroom and increase their rent. That's not the life part I'm talking about. What I'm getting at here ultimately is that work and life aren't separate boxes that we can tuck away. So you, everyone has a kitchen, I assume, right? And I think if you're like me, there's that one drawer in the kitchen where everything from like birthday candles to batteries to tape to things that shouldn't be there are just kind of in the messy drawer. It's like the kitchen mess drawer. Well, that's kind of the metaphor as well. The interconnected, intertwined spilling overs of work and life are sitting in this drawer. And so, what we need to be thinking about as leaders in the organization is, well, what can I do within the work sphere so that that individual feels that they might be blooming with some of the work factors, and that goes into the drawer because they go home. But Ramona, there are things that people bring from home into the workplace, and we need to be pretty cognizant of what some of those factors are if we want our employee to perform, to be happy, to be purpose driven, et cetera. So let me give you a very, very short example of mine, a personal one. So so I've been a leader of teams right across the world, and in this particular case, the team I had was about 150 or so, and I think they're in 10 or 11 countries. And my leadership team was mostly at headquarters. This is when I worked for SAP, and I had a couple of people in Europe as well. So my headquarters at the time was in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And at that headquarters where we were based, I was coming into work for about 2 weeks or so, and I wasn't myself. And there was a reason I wasn't myself was because there was an operation that was performed on me that didn't really go well, but I didn't want to tell anybody because I wanted to be stoic. I wanted to prove that I was tough, but it was affecting me. And it was affecting obviously the way in which I was, interacting with my team and everyone
Mhm.
until finally one day, my wife was asking me, Denise, she's like, say, how's it going? I'm like, well, I'm not feeling good. And she's like, have you told your team about what's going on with you? Maybe not the operation specifically, but like what's happened. I'm like, no, I held that from them. She's like, what, you an idiot? Like, open up, like tell them that at least, you've had something personal happen to you and it's affecting you. I was like, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. So, one of the life factors we might get into at some point is called wellness or well being. And my well being plummeted because I was going through something personally,
Mhm.
but it was affecting me at work. And my boss, who was in Germany, was nowhere aware of that. But I was affecting my team in their kind of work life factors. So there's always chances for us to kind of think, well, what is it that I can do to be a little more transparent? But as a leader, am I asking some of those questions, just knowing maybe in some of the life factors, if there's anything I can do, more like as a coach and a guide rather than someone that like a financial advisor, if you will.
Mhm. Then our audience is composed of leaders as well as team members. We have like a very diverse crowd here. Somebody's asking, do managers only need to take responsibility for establishing the garden environment, or
No.
does the employee also need to cultivate in order to bloom?
Yes, that's exactly the point. There's a mutual point here. So
Hmm.
Leaders, of course, should be open and transparent, and kind of as the leader of that team or unit or organization, should they be having deeper conversations and understanding of what work and life means to their employees? Yes. But if you, as a human being, as an individual, not leading a team, are first of all not aware and cognizant of what are some of the work and life factors that affect you, then what you're doing is basically burying your head in the sand. And so you're unable to actually have conversations with your boss or other team members about how work and life are going for you in the context, ultimately, right, of whether you bloom or not. So if you don't know there are things that are upsetting you, maybe you're blind to or clueless or don't understand the strategy of where the team or the organization is going. Maybe you are feeling like the operational norms of your team or the organization are bumpy. It feels like sandpaper. It's like I can't get stuff done. Why are people emailing me and texting me at 8 o'clock at night, even though there's the idea that we're not supposed to be doing that? Like, there are certain things there that can irk you, and if you're not aware of what some of those factors are that irk you, then you're in no position actually to do something about it. So I absolutely agree. This is something for both leaders and non-leaders, which is why when I went and did the research and the data across the world, I specifically worked with a big pocket of leaders and a larger pocket of non-leaders to see what it meant to them to bloom or not to bloom. So, beautiful question, Ramona.
Mhm. Setting limits and thinking about limits is something that somebody dropped here in the chat. Goes in the direction of what you just said. Let's talk about those factors in detail. You just mentioned them a couple of times. Which are the six work factors that you are introducing in the book?
Yeah, I guess I just introduced a couple of those. So there's six work ones. And by the way, how did it get to six? Well, in the research we did around the globe for about a year and a half, we sort of were asking what are the factors that affect you most at work, and then we kind of limit it to the top six on both sides, work and life. So, what are the six for work? Um, the number one factor was trust. So our leaders and teams and organizations demonstrating behavior basically so that there's advocacy. So can we advocate for one another? Do I feel trusted in the team or organization? The second is belonging. So do I feel like basically I'm understood? Do I feel that it's safe and I'm represented in that team or organization? Number three is valued. That's different than belonging. Valued basically means, am I paid fairly? Am I recognized for my efforts? Am I appreciated? Number four is purpose. I mentioned that. So, does the organization stand for something more than profit and revenue? So, is there some greater good that ultimately the organization is about? So, that's purpose. And then number five and six, strategy and norms. Strategy is like, where are we going? And do I understand where we're going? Do I maybe have a little bit of a comment, maybe to say about that feedback? And then norms. So the principles, the guidelines, the mechanisms in which we get work done. That could be email, collaboration. That could be, platforms. That could be processes, whatever the case may be. So trust, belonging, valued, feeling valued, purpose, strategy, and norms are the six, Ramona.
Mhm. Do you think that someone can foster a blooming mindset in an environment where all these factors are not met?
No, absolutely not.
Mm,
I mean, so those that know my work, I am not a fan of employee engagement either. And however, when I say that, I mean it's because again, we think that everyone should be engaged all the time. So I'm a very big advocate of not using employee engagement scoring. And here's the thing: when you think about the work factors, there's an element there ultimately. If you just focus on the work factors, you're like, well, that's kind of like some of the employee engagement factors. Okay, I'll give you that, sort of. But the point being is that if a team member it doesn't feel trusted, doesn't feel like they
mhm,
belong, doesn't feel valued right away, you're like, well, what am I doing here? So there's kind of like the first three are like almost like individual work factors, right? For me as a human being, do I feel
mhm,
trusted? Do I feel like I belong? Is there value in my work? And then they kind of look at the other three. When you think about purpose and strategy and norms, these are more like organizational work factors. And so when you think about strategy, do I really understand where we're going? If you don't, why are you there? If you don't understand if the organization isn't purpose driven, if it's just there to hire and fire people, if it's there to tear the planet apart, if it's there to just be inducing shareholder return and giving money back to the stockholders. Terrible, right? Who wants to work at that kind of place? So,
Mhm.
yes, I mean, to summarize your question, if if you don't have a lot of those work factors going for you, pretty tough to actually go to work every day and say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna have a great time today because all my life factors are great." Well, I beg to differ.
Yeah. What we want to do here is deliver actionable insights and actionable tips. So let's look
More?
at trust a bit more closely, even more.
Okay.
Trust in the workplace, as you just said, it can be very fragile. Like it needs to be built over time. It can be destroyed very easily. Can you describe some actionable steps to boost trust with your managers and also your coworkers? If that's the one factor that's missing, what is your advice? How
Okay,
can you
okay, yeah. So,
increase
okay,
trust?
so in no particular order, right? So when you think about trust, we have to be as a leader, as a team member, you have to feel like there's some authenticity, that no one's lying to you, that there's consistency, that people are behaving the same way over and over again, hopefully in a good way. That's the idea, and that
Hmm.
you're being advocated for. So someone's got your back. The CEO of Microsoft, his name's Satya Nadella, he calls it air cover. I need to provide air cover for my team members so that they feel that I've got their back. So authenticity, I should say, sorry, consistency and advocacy. So what are some things you could be thinking about? Um, well, first of all, be real. So if your leader or you as an individual are not being real, i.e., revealing to yourself that you're more than your work, that you have a life, like my example about that operation, I wasn't being
Hmm.
real. And so I wasn't being authentic. So, how can you be real to your team members so you're not a robot to the team around you? What about things like integrity? So, when you're basically talking with your team, are you honest? Do you demonstrate that integrity in your leadership actions by being accountable? So for example, you say you'll deliver a report or a PDF or some sort of market research on the Thursday at 12 noon, and then you ignore it, you don't tell anyone you're late, you just sort of say you forget about it. Like there's no trust there when you're not being um consistently integral to the actions in which that you take. What about when I talk about advocacy, Ramona? So, what about sticking up for people even if they're not in the room? So, some people will talk rumors, etc. Oh, uh, there's Herminia. Herminia is she's always late at work. She comes in at 9:05 every day, and the leader could say and step in and say, "Well, wait a second." Instead of fueling that fire and instead of ignoring it, could say, "Actually, you know what? Herminia drops off her child at daycare, and she's allowed to come in every day at 9:05. Did you know that she just changed daycares and that it's 10 minutes more away?" Whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
that straightforward talk and advocating for people when they're not in the room is something that can go such a long way for the credibility and thus the trust, of that team and that leader.
Hmm. That's great advice. Let's come to the life factors. You, as a manager, team leader, coworker, you surely can't improve all the elements in a team member's non working lives. And also, that's not the objective, luckily.
No.
But however, you can support six primary life factors that also boost well being at work. That's what you're saying, Dan. What are those six life factors?
Yeah. So again, to think of the life factors, think of them as more like personal attributes or personal habits that you bring into the workplace. It's not balancing your bank account. It's not should I buy a new car, right? It's not that stuff. Should I have a kid? Should I go to my grandmother's birthday party? That is not the point. The six life factors affect work, but they also affect life very directly. So the six are relationships. So, how do I build them? What's my community? Do I have the skills in which to build relationships and connections and networks? Skills. So, do I have the attributes in which to develop myself to go from point A to point B or A to Z, in fact? The third one is well-being. We kind of touched on this. So that's it's your physical, it's your emotional, it's your social kind of health. So basically, are you well? Number four is a sense of meaning. So it's self-worth. Like, do I feel like I am a human being every day? Do I have self-worth? Am I self-actualized? And number 5 and 6 are agency and respect. Agency is, do I feel like I have the willpower to make decisions? And am I allowed to? So, can I bring that type of thinking to work? And 6, respect is my admiration and appreciation for who I really am.
Mhm.
So, if I just on the last one there quickly, because some people misunderstand respect, if I have a tattoo on my arm and I'm really proud of that tattoo, but my employer makes me wear a long sleeve shirt to cover up the tattoo, I'm not going to feel appreciated or admired if my employer says you can't wear a tattoo. I mean, let's grow up a little bit. That's part of my identity. And so I would like the respect of my employer, ultimately, to, I mean, as long as the thing wasn't a harmful or a tattoo that does something weird, but it's just like part of me. I want my employer to feel the respect or show me the respect.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Let's ask our audience. What do you think? Which factors have the most potential for you to thrive by addressing them? I
Mm.
see a lot of great questions here coming into the Q&A. I'm going to repeat my question to the audience. In which factor, on which factors do you see the most potential for you to thrive by addressing them? Let's see what people are saying.
Meaning, I see that sense of meaning at work.
Mhm.
Kimberly, well said. Respect, sense of meaning, empathy. Yep. So I would put that definitely in the category empathy of kind of like belonging and valued. Like, is my employer, my leader, feeling that they get me?
Team spirit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Trust, a lot of trust, a lot of belonging,
Mhm.
relationships. Yep. Value. It's really good
Pretty.
from Kevin. Agency to empower. That's key, right? So if I feel from an agency perspective that I can bring my self-determination and my smarts, like my who I am, on the ability to kind of connect dots and make decisions in my role in the workplace and perhaps like with the greater team, how good am I going to feel with that category of agency? That is that empowerment piece, which often leaders, because they become micromanagers, they miss. And so that's why
Mhm.
agency is a life skill that you bring into the workplace.
Yeah. I saw autonomy, transparency. Thank you very much. I like all of those very much. Somebody's writing having fun. I think that ties back into meaning, like seeing the purpose in what you
Absolutely.
do.
Yep.
Then you automatically have fun doing what you do. Then, as you point out, all these factors are crucial for fostering an integrated work-life work-life ecosystem. Your book provides practical solutions for leaders to cultivate this environment. And you're addressing the so-called garden phases. We were talking about them in the beginning. Could you elaborate, please, a bit on that? What are the four garden phases?
Sure. So I guess I want people to imagine like a 2 by 2 matrix for a second. And if you have here on the y axis, that's the one that goes up and down, work, and the one down here, which is the x axis, is life. So work and life. The phases that we go through, all of us will go through, are really as follows. So if work is going really well, so you're right up at the top, and life is going really well, you're up here. You're up in the top right hand quadrant. That's blooming. That's when you bloom. So when those factors of work, so the trust, the belonging, value, et cetera, and the life factors like agency, we talked about, relationships, meaning, when they're cooking, like when they're positive, you're going to bloom. And however, again, which is why I have disagreements with employee engagement and work life balance. We can't be blooming all the time. You can't be engaged all the time. You can't be balanced all the time. And so we have to recognize as human beings, as employees, as people in life as well, that we're not going to be blooming all the time. Things happen. And so if you think back to the 2 by 2 matrix, well, what are those other personas or what are those are phases in the garden? Well, if we bloom when both are going well, great, good for you. I saw again back to the assessment, there's lots of you, about 30% of you were blooming. but 70% of you were not who took the assessment. I'm not surprised. I'm not worried. But what do they mean? Okay, so the one that I call budding. So budding means basically work is going really well. So you got the work factors are really, really cooking. They're all pretty much positive. But the life factors, you might have a couple of those, maybe more than a couple, that are not going well. So budding basically means you're succeeding at work, but you need further self development. And that's fine. Like work can be going well, but there's some life factors that aren't. Okay, so you're budding. The opposite of budding. So again, now when life is going really well, but work is not going so well, is what I call stunted. And so if you're stunted, I just basically say you're stalled at work, but you're thriving as an individual in your life factors. And again, that's fine. Like it's not bad. It just means there's some things there at work that you should probably talk to your boss about, or at least work with your team on. Maybe that's strategy. Maybe those are some of the norms. Maybe that's feeling valued. Whatever it is, just know that being stunted is not bad. And then the last one is you might expect is in the bottom left-hand corner, right? So it's down here when work and life are not going so well. And instead of calling that disengaged or dead, I call it renewal. And the reason for renewal is that you're basically in need of refreshing the majority of those work life factors. And again, that's not bad. And I just want to sort of share, Ramona, just a very, I guess, personal story here. Um, I am 53 years old. I started working right out of university at the age of 22. And so I've been working for 30 years. And I have had basically five main roles. So I have worked in a K to 12 school. I have worked in a university. I have worked at SAP. I have worked at TELUS, big Canadian telecom company. And I've worked on my own now for 6 years. So five different places where I've worked. And inside of those organizations, right, in total, I have had eight different roles. So eight roles, 30 years, five different companies, including my own. So when I did and looked back at my 30 plus year career, and I plotted the different stages of those 30 years, I was in all four of those categories or personas actually multiple times because an acquisition occurred. I moved cities. I had a kid. I had another kid. I had another kid. I had moved again, different city. I had, meaning I had difficulty with relationships. I got very ill. I got a boss. I got fired. And then a new boss came in and changed everything. And so I plummeted on most of my work factors. The fact of the matter is because I'm 53, I can look in the rear view mirror of my work life garden, work life bloom mirror and say to you, I'm still here. And I know that there are times when I was blooming and it was amazing, but there are times there when I was budding or stunted or in renewal. And in hindsight, although kind of not great and sometimes difficult, I still learned through that, which helped me be the person I am today. So,
Mhm.
a long story short, Ramona, is I'm just a normal human being like everyone here today. We will have ups and downs. And don't worry if you're getting a renewal assessment or a stunted or a budding. Things do get better if you apply yourself and your organization, your leader, you have good conversations about that as well.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that very personal story. You see all the hearts flying in, so that
Uh,
resonates with people. In the book, you offer a great variety of tools. That's what I really love about the book. And there is one tool which is called soil test.
People are like,
What
is Dan really turned himself into a green thumb gardener? Like, what is with this weird Canadian? Okay.
it's a gardening guide.
So
What for and how do you conduct a soil test?
a soil test. People are like, is he doing a pH balance on the soil? Do we have to, do the leaders have to go to the person's homes or their balconies on their condos or their apartments and sort of test the soil? No, but a soil test is again a metaphor for the garden box, right, people? So again, if you're a leader, a soil test or conducting a soil test is what leaders need to be doing on a continual basis. And that is an open conversation, an open dialogue with your garden. And the garden in this case is the team members. So it's a leader scanning the team members of their current work life factors. So again, let's say Ramona, you were my boss, and you've been my boss now for 4 years, and we have never gone in the Swiss Meadow Alps, and we've never gone hiking. But you notice that I've come into work over the last month or so, and looking a little bit down. So not as perky, not as much energy, not normal Dan. He's like slumping a little bit. And if you are not having open conversations about, hey Dan, what's up, dude? Something gone wrong, or something at work, something at life. And it's not being a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist. It's just having empathy, like people are mentioning in the chat, to have this continual dialogue of, well, how's it going? And when you have and frame conversations with things like, well, are you well? How's your wellness factor? Did something happen with relationships? Like, is there something I can need to help you with? Can I introduce you to somebody? This is what I'm getting at. A soil test is simply a metaphor for checking the pH balance of your garden, which is the soil in which your team members will be budding or stunted or blooming or in renewal. And you're having that conversation with them. That's all it means. So have conversations, Ramona, with me to find out how I'm doing in work and life. And then that's your soil test. Very simple.
Hmm. I could imagine, depending on the company culture, also depending on, like, in general, the culture you're in, that could be more or less comfortable.
Yes, exactly. So, but as leaders, we all have an opportunity to go with the grain or against the grain. If the company culture is one that is very vibrant and open and transparent, it's much easier to have a soil test, obviously. But if the
Hmm.
company culture is one that's rigid, very stoic, very crusty, proper, everyone is just like blinders on and there's no happiness, that doesn't mean you as a leader can't be conducting an open, transparent soil test, like a rapport, the empathy we talked about in the chat that people are bringing in here, like this happiness. Like, why? Just because the culture over here is crusty doesn't mean that you as a human being leader can't be the opposite of the company culture and create your own culture with your team. I vehemently disagree with following the norm of what the company culture is if it's rigid or disengage or siloed or what have you.
Hmm. Then
EQ, yeah. Someone
Sharon.
mentioned someone mentioned emotional intelligence. That's basically what the soil test is. It's having the
Mhm.
EQ to actually have these conversations. So well done, uh,
You still find it?
Leslie. Leslie. I want to make sure I got the right name. Well done, Leslie.
Yeah. Then Sharon is asking, is it normal you're stuck for a long time in any of the work life phases?
Is it say that again? Sorry, Ramona. Is it normal
Is it
what?
is it normal you're stuck for a long
Oh,
time in any of the phases?
okay. So I it does depend. And this is where the relationship between, it's sort of like a three-way relationship between the organization kind of culture, which is where strategy and norms and purpose come in, how the leader is operating and treating people, obviously in the team, and what you're doing, ultimately with your development. So, what are you going to work on as an individual, as a human being? It's not a one-way thing, and it doesn't mean that it needs to stay that way. But there are three key factors, right? So, organization, the leader, and the team in which that leader operates. You may be a part of that team, or maybe you're the leader on that team. And then there's you as the individual. And so, when you're thinking about it in that way, the three dimensions, and you start poking your own self and saying, huh, do I believe in these work and life factors are ever going to change? Now, obviously, you have a lot more to do on the life factors. I think you can involve your leader, your boss on some of those life factors. Again, like help with relationship building, help with sense of self-determination and agency and decision making, etc. So just leave that for a second. But if you think that the organization's strategy is terrible, it's never going to change, or that the operating norms of the team or the organization's never going to change, you're like, oh my God, it's just terrible here. What am I doing here? Then I think you've got your answer that,
Mm.
well, it's probably never going to change. And so then you go back to the individual. And so now, Ramona, you have to ask yourself, what am I doing here? And these are very hard questions that people have to ask themselves. If you believe that you're in a stunted, particularly, or renewal phase persona, and you don't believe things are ever going to change, particularly in some of those work factors, then you should be asking yourself the sort of JP Sartre existential Kierkegaard type questions to be that self, which one truly is. Uh, do I belong here? Or might I make changes with my work and my life?
Mhm. Yeah. I want to come back to the previous question. We were talking about the soil test, and there is also a tool which is called the water test. It's just too
Oh,
interesting.
yes.
Please tell me what that is.
Well, a water test is the water metaphorically good enough to drink.
Hmm.
And so that's for you as the individual, and particularly leaders, but all of us, right? It's that regular self reflection test. Is the water good enough to drink? And am I applying enough water to myself? And if I'm a leader, to the team? So it's actually assessing yourself, and you're saying, huh, how am I doing? And can I drink the water? Am I drinking enough water? Am I over watering? And so, water test is basically asking yourself, do the work and life factors for myself? Am I reflecting enough on how I'm coming across? And am I able to see that in the greater construct, right, of this work life model of the 2x2 matrix and what how I am as a persona? Am I budding, stunted, renewal, or blooming? And if I feel like I'm falling in some of those, well, what changes and what differences do I need to make as a team member who also might happen to be a leader?
Very well, thank you. I have a final question. I'm looking at my watch, and time always flies by in
Oh
these
my gosh.
webinars, especially if the audience is so super active. Like there are so many questions. A final one, which I want to ask you, is how can work-life bloom support achieving organizational diversity? That's one which is very important to me, which is why I want to
Oh,
ask.
okay. So let's take a look at two of the factors. Let's look at in work. So the work factors like belonging and respect. So actually, let's do belonging and respect on a life factor. Let's do one from each. So belonging from a diversity perspective, like what I want to be thinking about, right, is things like if you do hiring panels, do you have diverse hiring panels so people can see right away in the interview that they might belong because there's different people that are actually on a hiring panel as opposed to three of one type or one identity. Um, if we're doing communication, like we should be very careful about our examples, our photos, company-wide initiatives. Do we make sure that people feel like they belong to some of those acts or demonstrations or things we do in the community? Do we celebrate in terms of belonging different cultures, different appreciation days? Are we inclusive with our holidays, or are we just sticking to Anglo-Saxon holidays? Like there's certain ways in which for us to be thinking about the strengthening of the bond in the organization to feel like we all belong and that we're not just part of one identity. So I think that on the work side is belonging. And when I think about respect, as a life factor, what are there? Just look at the benefits package. Like I know people are like, what? Well, do we have different benefits packages for different types of people? Do we have, for example, grand paternity leave? People are like, what does that mean? Well, you're respecting some of the older people in the organization who might be a grandparent. Do you maybe give them like 2 weeks, 3 weeks of grand paternity leave so that they can be with their grandkids? Gosh, would that be a feeling of respect on my life because I just became a grandparent for the first time? So it's just little things like that that we might be able to be thinking about where I take the respect of my life and bring it to work or the work side and bring it to life. so that we can feel like we both belong and respect equally for those factors.
Hmm. Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. I wish we could go on. It was a pleasure having you here today. Thank you very
The
much.
pleasure was mine, Ramona. I'm a big fan of Get Abstract. A big thanks to you. Big thanks to everyone that showed up today. Big love to all. I hope you all bloom, but I know you won't, and that's okay. Okay, Ramona?
I think that's a very good message for the ending. Also, from my side, thank you to everybody for watching and commenting. It's always so much fun. Make sure that you check out Dan's summary of Work Life Bloom and also the other book summaries that we have of Dan's books in the Get Abstract library. For more relevant content on today's topic, there are channels like Life Advice, Leadership, so you'll find tons of good, actionable knowledge there. And watch out for the follow up email that I mentioned in the beginning with recording of this session. It'll be in your inbox in the next few days. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. You reach us at corporate@getabstract.com. Or, and here's my offer to you, which was kindly given by Dan, you can reach out to him directly. danpontefract.com is his website, or speak at danpontefract.com is the email address that you may use to get in touch. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for further events brought to you by Get Abstract. And I can only say happy gardening.
May we all have a green thumb, Ramona.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Bye, Dan. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Ciao.